Okay, let's give YouTube a bit of time to catch up, guys. If I've got a new mic, so if you could tell me if the audio is okay, I would really appreciate it. Or kind of like, you know, right. There should be enough time. Welcome back, history fans, for another episode of Fistory. Tonight, part 2 of the Black Death, the plague that decimated, well, really the whole world. Sort of between, I guess, like 1345 and I guess like 1350, that sparked like a bunch of sounds good. Audio is fine. Thank you. That sparked a bunch of like plagues that went on like really for centuries. It became like a recurring thing. And one of the things that I really want to do with this series is just find sort of first-hand accounts and read them, because they're insane. And I don't find like enough history doing that, right? Like you find like a lot of books now and they'll be like, oh yes, blah, 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 blah. It's like I don't want to hear from you, right? I mean, I know, you might be like a credentialed PhD and all that kind of other stuff, but what I really want to hear is the writings from the people who were there on the ground. So that's what we are going to do. This amazing picture. I don't know. I don't know who did it. I just found it on Yandex. La Peste de Firenze. Is that Florence? Is that Firenze? Anyway, there is also so much amazing art around this phenomenon. Audio sounds far away. That's not good. What if we turn it up a little bit? How's that? Is that any better? Sades, can you tell me? Is the microphone working fine? Chat, can you tell me? Is it all going good? Oh, I hate it when I'm in this space waiting for the chat to give me feedback on like whether something's working or not. I can get a little bit closer to the mic. Right, okay, a little bit better. Okay, so wait, let's turn up the mic a little. Right, audio is fine, just go with it. Okay, right, thanks very much. Cheers. Right, so in my quest to find on the ground first-hand accounts of the Black Death, I came across this amazing book, The Black Death by Rosemary Horrox, which is basically just sort of a collection of first-hand accounts of the Black Death. And after reading the Decameron last week, I thought we would just read from this, which is pretty cool. You can find it on Anna's archive if you want. It's out there. So she just does like a little bit of a sort of introduction to it on sort of like where it came from. The plague was probably active in Central Asia in 1331 to 32. Thence it spread south to China and India, and west through Transoxiana and Persia. It had reached southern Russia by 1345-36 when it attacked the cities of the Golden Horde, including Astrakhan. By this time, it was moving fast down the main trading arteries, and as far as Europe is concerned, the crucial line of transmission seems to have been overland to the Crimea and then by sea from the Genoese trading centers in the Black Sea to Italy. This is the route described by de Mussis, whose version can be supported by Eastern accounts. In 1343, Italian merchants were expelled from their trading depot of Tana and took refuge in Kaffa. In 1345-46, they were besieged there by Kipchak Khan Janibeg, and in the course of the siege, the Khan's army was struck by plague. The besiegers spread the disease to the Genoese within the city by lobbing infected corpses over the walls, an early and apparently highly effective form of germ warfare. Indeed, this is largely regarded as the sort of first incident of biological warfare, the siege of Kaffa. The fleeing Genoese brought the plague to Constantinople in 1347, and in the same year it reached Italy. From there, it spread almost literally in all directions. It seems to have been Italian merchants who carried the disease to the Eastern Mediterranean and the Near East. The plague had crossed the Alpine passes into the Holy Roman Empire within a year, and by June 1348, it had reached Bavaria and was in southern Austria by November. Vienna was also affected the following year, as was northern Germany. Italian vessels also carried the plague into the Western Mediterranean. Contemporary accounts convey an image of a single fleet carrying death from port to port along the French littoral and the western seaboard of the Iberian Peninsula, anchoring just long enough to spread the disease before being driven away to infect a new port. This cannot have been literally true, but the picture of plague-bearing ships roaming the sea gives a vivid sense of contemporary paranoia, as does Louis Ellingen's comment that people at Avignon would not eat the new season's spices in case they had come from one of the infected ships. From the Mediterranean coast, the plague spread north through France. It was raging in Avignon in the spring of 1348 and had reached Paris by June. At the same time, it was moving westwards through Toulouse to Bordeaux, and was probably from Gascony that it crossed to England in the summer of 1348. Actual accounts from England are a bit thin on the ground. Maybe there's some in this book, I don't know. But I was doing a bit of research, and all the links I found led me to the British Library, and the links were like dead. So, thanks, British Library, you suck. Chroniclers disagreed in their identification of its first port of call. Bristol was a favoured and plausible candidate. Melcombe, now part of Weymouth, was another. Henry Knighton preferred Southampton. The difference hardly matters. By this date, the plague was spreading on several fronts, and these ports may well have been affected more or less simultaneously. The plague raged in their hinterland throughout the autumn and winter. By autumn, it had reached London. Geoffrey Lebecker implies that it had spread eastwards from Gloucester and Oxford, but it is more likely that the capital had been infected independently from seaborne trade. Such trade certainly continued throughout the epidemic, and Bergen was infected from London in May 1349. The plague continued in London throughout winter and the following spring. By then, it had also begun to spread north. If one tries to chart its movements in detail, it becomes obvious, as indeed one would expect, that it did not advance evenly in a broad swath across the country. In spite of the plague's early arrival in Bristol and Dorset, rural Devon seems not to have been affected until the following year. St Albans Abbey, a mere day's journey from London, held the disease at bay until early April 1349. The plague had reached York by late May, but the Lincolnshire Wolds were not affected until July, and Muir Abbey in the East Riding of Yorkshire seems to have escaped until August. One of the most terrifying things about the plague must have been that people could see it coming. The northern Italian cities may, as de Mussis implies, have been caught entirely by surprise, but most other centres were alerted in advance. Louis Hellingen was able to warn his colleagues in Bruges a year before the plague reached Flanders. Travellers and pilgrims carried home stories of deserted landscapes and uncomfortable personal brushes with death. In England, the Archbishop of York was already ordering prophylactic processions at the end of July 1348. By August, several of his fellow bishops were taking action, in each case because they thought plague was due to arrive rather than because it already had. Of course, not everyone took these warnings very seriously, and the bishop's descriptions of the horrors in store evidently did not send shivers down every spine. Gilles Le Mussis, the abbot of Tournai, complained that although there were great rumors of the mortality, people did not take much notice until the blow actually fell. But many people must have suffered the intense anxiety of watching the plague advancing on their homes. William Dean gives a glimpse of such pressures in his not entirely sympathetic description of the elderly Bishop of Rochester, who spent the winter 1348-49 worrying himself sick about the plague, which was then raging in London, but was not to affect Kent seriously until the following spring. The obverse of this reaction was the frenzied rejoicing noted by the chronicler of Saint-Denis in a community which had hitherto escaped the plague, although the neighbouring villages had been affected. In proper moralizing fashion, the merrymaking villagers were promptly struck down by a violent hailstorm. Fucking hell, man. So it really went on. So we've got a few first-hand accounts that I'm just going to go through in this account. Oh, we got a super chat from Mikey Bikey for $3. Fistory Funds. Thank you very much, Mikey Bikey. You too can donate or send super chats or whatever to the channel. Linkies are tagged in each of the chats. Thank you very much. Okay, so the arrival of the plague. Gabriel de Mussis was a lawyer of Piacenza, who died in 1356. In his Historia de Morbo, the history of the morbidity, the history of death, is the main source for the arrival of the plague in Europe, although it is not true, as his first editor believed, that de Mussis was actually a passenger on the ship which brought the plague to Genoa. He is now known to have remained in Piacenza throughout the epidemic. The factual details which de Mussis provides have often been quoted, but this complete translation restores them to their moral framework and extended meditation on the plague as an expression of divine anger. And this is from A.W. Henschel, document zur Geschichte der Schwarzen Todes. Schwarzen Todes is German for the Black Death. So this is a very fiery. Is this guy a preacher? It says he's a lawyer. One of the interesting things about these first-hand accounts is the way it contrasts with modern Christianity. You're seeing this sort of, in America, all across the West at the moment, this sort of new modern Christianity that's, this very, very milquetoast, and, to be a Christian is, to believe in a God where nothing bad ever happens and all this kind of other stuff. Well, check this out. In the name of God, amen. Here begins an account of the disease or mortality which occurred in 1348, put together by Gabriel de Mussis of Piacenza. May this stand as a perpetual reminder to everyone now living and yet to be born, how Almighty God, King of heaven, Lord of the living and of the dead, who holds all things in his hand, looked down from heaven and saw the entire human race wallowing in the mire of manifold wickedness, enmeshed in wrongdoing, pursuing numberless vices, drowning in a sea of depravity because of a limitless capacity for evil, bereft of all goodness, not fearing the judgments of God, and chasing after everything evil, regardless of how hateful and loathsome it was. I wonder what do you think of Los Angeles? Seeing such things, he called out to the earth, "What are you doing, held captive by gangs of worthless men? Soiled with the filth of sinners, are you totally helpless? What are you doing? Why do you not demand human blood in vengeance for this wrongdoing? Why do you tolerate my enemies and adversaries? When confronted by such wantonness, you should have swallowed my opponents. Make yourself ready to exercise the vengeance which lies within your power." Come on, bro, right? Like, Christianity is like, God, never punishes people, bro. Like, come on. And the earth replied, "I, established by your power, shall open and swallow up the countless criminals as soon as you give the word. When the enraged judge gives his signal with violent thunder from heaven and leads the elements, the planets, the stars, and the orders of angels against the human race in an unspeakable judgment, enlisting all forms of life to wipe out the sinners at one savage stroke, I shall refuse the usual harvest. I shall not yield grain, wine, and oil." God said, I don't know like why this guy basically says he speaks for God, but this is the way like people talked back then, I guess. God said, "The exercise of justice belongs to me. I am the life of the living. I bear the keys of death. I bring retribution, giving each individual his due. My hands shaped the heavens. I formed light, created the world, and adorned it. Oh, you sinner, wretched and yet more wretched, why have you chosen to resist me and to scorn all my commands, laws, and judgments? Where is the faith of baptism and the price of my redemption? When I fashioned my creation, I never imagined that you would fall into these snares and come to this end. I had prepared heaven for you, not hell, and look where you have brought yourself. When you compelled me, who upheld the spheres, to descend into the womb of a virgin." Wait, is he basically saying like God was compelled by man to incarnate in the form of Jesus Christ? I think that's a bit of a heresy, mate. I'm just saying. But I guess it was a weird time, right? Like heresy abounds. When you compelled me, who upheld the spheres, to descend into the womb of a virgin, I endured hunger, thirst, toil, crucifixion, and death, and your deeds, you ingrate, condemn me still to the cross. I ought to have punished you with eternal death, but pity conquered me. This is so hardcore. Behold, I have been merciful towards you, and you have barely acknowledged the salvation you have gained through me. You are unworthy of eternal bliss. showing yourself instead to be worthy of the torments of hell. Leave my earth. I abandon you to be torn into pieces by dragons. You shall go into the shadows, where there will be perpetual wailing and gnashing of teeth. Now, disaster is at hand. Your strength must have an end. The sight of the vanities and lecheries to which you have abandoned yourself has provoked me to fury. May evil spirits arise with the power to devour you. May you have no escape from this time forward. Dude, hardcore. I pronounce these judgments. May your joys be turned to mourning, your prosperity be shaken by adversity, the course of your life be passed in never-ending terror. It sounds like COVID lockdowns. Behold the image of death. Behold, I open the infernal floodgates. Let hunger strike down those it seizes. Let peace be driven from the ends of the earth. Let dissensions arise. Let kingdoms be consumed in detestable war. Let mercy perish throughout the world. Let disasters, plagues, violence, robberies, strife, and all kinds of wickedness arise. Next, at my command, let the planets poison the air and corrupt the whole earth. Let there be universal grief and lamentation. Let the sharp arrows of sudden death have dominion throughout the world. Let no one be spared, either for their sex or their age. Let the innocent perish with the guilty, and no one escape. Because those I appointed to be shepherds of the world have behaved towards their flocks like ravening wolves, and do not preach the word of God, but neglect all the Lord's business, and have barely even urged repentance, I shall take a savage vengeance upon them. I shall wipe them from the face of the earth. Their enemy and adversary will seize their hidden treasure. They, along with all the other wrongdoers, will bear the heavy burden of their offenses. Their office, acquired through deceit, will not avail them, and because they feared men rather than God and valued their grace more highly, they will be branded as hypocrites. Religion turned out of doors will grieve. The treacherous and maleficent fellowship of priests and clergy, imperiled by their own failings, will be destroyed. No one will be given rest. Poisoned arrows will strike everyone. Fevers will throw down the proud, and incurable disease will strike by lightning. Strike like lightning. After this a warning had been given to mortals, disease was sent forth. The quivering spear of the Almighty was aimed everywhere and infected the whole human race with its pitiless wounds. Orion, that cruel star, and the tail of the dragon and the angel hurling vials of poison into the sea, and the appalling weather of Saturn were given leave to harm land and sea, men and trees. Advancing from east to west with plague-bearing steps, they poured out the poisoned vessels throughout the countries of the world, leaving fiery tokens on the sick. And so the terrible violence of death, running through the world, threatening ruin, devoured mortals by a sudden blow, as I shall describe below. Mourn, mourn, you peoples, and call upon the mercy of God. So that's his like preamble. Okay, wait, hang on. Yiz sent a Ko-Fi. Let me just check that out. Thank you very much, Yiz. I've been playing through the pixel remasters of the original 6 Final Fantasy games the last few weeks when I can spare the time. Love them. Highly recommend it for $5. Thank you very much, Yiz. I appreciate that. Right. So, okay. So this is that's his preamble. He's like, everyone has been very, very naughty. And God is angry. He's very angry. He's like Johnny Cash on crack. He's gonna strike you down, right? Like the time is nigh, all that kind of stuff. In 1346, in the countries of the East, countless numbers of Tartars and Saracens were struck down by a mysterious illness which brought sudden death. Within these countries' broad regions, far-spreading provinces, magnificent kingdoms, cities, towns, and settlements, ground down by illness and devoured by dreadful death, were soon stripped of their inhabitants. An eastern settlement under the rule of the Tartars called Tana, which lay to the north of Constantinople and was much frequented by Italian merchants, was totally abandoned after an incident there which led to its being besieged and attacked by hordes of Tartars, who gathered in a short space of time. The Christian merchants, who had been driven out by force, were so terrified of the power of the Tartars that to save themselves and their belongings, they fled in an armed ship to Kaffa, a settlement in the same part of the world which had been founded long ago by the Genoese. Oh God, see how the heathen Tartar races. I don't know, mate. That's a bit it's a bit spicy. Someone needs to go back in time, cancel this guy. Heathen Tartar races. I don't know, mate. So certainly not current year friendly. That's all I'm saying. See how the heathen Tartar races, pouring together from all sides, suddenly invested the city of Kaffa and besieged the trapped Christians there for almost 3 years. There, hemmed in by an immense army, they could hardly draw breath, although food could be shipped in, which offered them some hope. But behold, the whole army was affected by a disease which overran the Tartars and killed thousands upon thousands every day. It was as though arrows were raining down from heaven to strike and crush the Tartars' arrogance. All medical advice and attention was useless. The Tartars died as soon as the signs of disease appeared upon their bodies. Swellings in the armpit or groin caused by coagulating humors, followed by a putrid fever. The dying Tartars, stunned and stupefied by the immensity of the disaster brought about by the disease, and realizing they had no hope of escape, lost interest in the siege, but they ordered corpses to be placed in catapults and lobbed into the city in the hope that the intolerable stench would kill everyone inside. What is like Mumbai? What seemed like mountains of dead were thrown into the city, and the Christians could not hide or flee or escape from them, although they dumped as many of the bodies as they could into the sea. And soon the rotting corpses tainted the air and poisoned the water supply, and the stench was so overwhelming that hardly one in several thousand was in a position to flee the remains of the Tartar army. Moreover, one infected man could carry the poison to others and infect people and places with the disease by look alone. No one knew or could discover a means of defense. Thus, almost everyone who had been in the east or in the regions to the south and north fell victim to sudden death after contracting this pestilential disease, as if struck by a lethal arrow which raised a tumor on their bodies. The scale of the mortality and the form which it took persuaded those who lived, weeping and lamenting, through the bitter events of 1346 to 1348. The Chinese, Indians, Persians, Medes, Kurds, Armenians, Cilicians, Georgians, Mesopotamians, Nubians, Ethiopians, Turks, Egyptians, Arabs, Saracens, and Greeks, for almost all the East has been affected, that the last judgment had come. Now it is time that we passed from east to west to discuss all the things which we ourselves have seen or known or consider likely on the basis of the evidence, and so by doing, to show forth the terrifying judgments of God. Listen, everybody, and it will set tears pouring from your eyes. For the Almighty has said, I shall wipe man, whom I created, off the face of the earth. Because he is flesh and blood, let him be turned to dust and ashes. My spirit shall not remain among men. What are you thinking of, merciful God, thus to destroy your creation and the human race, to order and command its sudden annihilation in this way? What has become of your mercy, the faith of our fathers, the Blessed Virgin, who holds sinners in her lap, the precious blood of the martyrs, the worthy army of confessors and virgins, the whole host of paradise who pray ceaselessly for sinners, the most precious death of Christ on the cross, and our wonderful redemption? Kind God, I beg that your anger may cease, that you do not destroy sinners in this way, and because you desire mercy rather than sacrifice, that you turn away all evil from the penitent, and do not allow the just to be condemned with the unjust. and here he's basically speaking for God. Again, bold. I don't know about that. In his personal headcanon, God replies, I hear you, sinner. Dropping words into my ears, I bid you weep. Ere the time for mercy has passed, I, God, am called to vengeance. This is quite interesting. If you remember the series I did on the Anabaptists, this phrase, the time for mercy has passed, was also used by the Anabaptists to justify very extreme violence. They were like, the door to mercy is closing. The time for mercy has passed. You know, it's time to get hardcore. I, God, am called to vengeance. It is my pleasure to take revenge on sin and wickedness. I shall give my signs to the dying. Let them take steps to provide for the health of their souls. As it happened among those who escaped from Kaffa by boat, were a few sailors who had been infected with the poisonous disease. Some boats were bound for Genoa, others went to Venice and to other Christian areas. When the sailors reached these places and mixed with the people there, it was as if they had brought evil spirits with them. Every city, every settlement, every place was poisoned by the contagious pestilence, and their inhabitants, both men and women, died suddenly. And when one person had contracted the illness, he poisoned his whole family, even as he fell and died, so that those preparing to bury his body were seized by death in the same way. Thus death entered through the windows, and as cities and towns were depopulated, their inhabitants mourned their dead neighbors. Speak, Genoa, of what you have done. Describe Sicily and Isolde Pelagi, the judgments of God. Recount Venice, Tuscany, and the whole of Italy, what you have done. We Genoese and Venetians bear the responsibility for revealing the judgments of God. Alas, once our ships had brought us to port, we went to our homes, and because we had been delayed by tragic events, and because among us there were scarcely 10 survivors from 1,000 sailors, relations, kinsmen, and neighbors flocked to us from all sides. But to our anguish, we were carrying the darts of death. While they hugged and kissed us, we were spreading poison from our lips, even as we spoke. When they returned to their own folk, these people speedily poisoned the whole family, and within 3 days the afflicted family would succumb to the dart of death. Mass funerals had to be held, and there was not enough room to bury the growing numbers of dead. Priests and doctors, upon whom most of the care of the sick devolved, had their hands full in visiting the sick, and alas, by the time they left, they too had been infected and followed the dead immediately to the grave. O fathers, O mothers, O children and wives, for a long time prosperity preserved you from harm, but one grave now covers you and the unfortunate alike. You who enjoyed the world, and upon whom pleasure and prosperity smiled, who mingled joys with follies, the same tomb receives you, and you are handed over as food for worms. This is a sort of a strain that came to sort of suffuse medieval Europe. I'll probably do a little bit on this, but you basically got these like sort of Dance of Death cards that became like quite popular. Where I thought I had them here somewhere. Ah, come on. Huh. So yes, anyway, there was a Dance of Death sort of like, oh yeah, here it is. Google's not showing it. Oh, thanks very much, Google. Yeah, here we go. Right. So these cards, this wasn't for a couple of 100 years later. This is death dining at the table of the rich man. This became a sort of a real current in medieval Christianity. Do not value worldly things, right? Death comes for the rich man. He comes for the merchant. He comes for the king. He comes for the miser. He comes for poor and rich alike. And well, I mean, it's not wrong, right? Like der rich man. So yeah. Oh, hard death, impious death, bitter death, cruel death, who divides parents, divorces spouses, parts children, separates brothers and sisters, we bewail our wretched plight. The past has devoured us. The present is gnawing our entrails. The future threatens yet greater dangers. What we labored to amass with feverish activity, we have lost in 1 hour. Where are the fine clothes of gilded youth? Where is nobility and the courage of fighters? Where the mature wisdom of elders and the regal throng of great ladies? Where the piles of treasure and precious stones? Alas, all have been destroyed, thrust aside by death. To whom shall we turn? Who can help us? To flee is impossible, to hide futile. Cities, fortresses, fields, woods, highways, and rivers are ringed by thieves, which is to say by evil spirits, the executioners of the supreme judge, preparing endless punishments for us all. So, wait, how much longer does this go? This is a lot longer than I thought. Oh my God, this fucking goes on for like ages. Okay. I've got another one from Padua as well. We can unfold a terrifying event which happened when an army was camped near Genoa. 4 of the soldiers left the force in search of plunder and made their way to Rivarolo on the coast, where the disease had killed all the inhabitants. Finding the houses shut up and no one about, they broke into one of the houses and stole a fleece, which they found on a bed. That's a bad idea. They then rejoined the army, and on the following night, the 4 of them bedded down under the fleece. When morning came, it finds them dead. As a result, everyone panicked, and thereafter no one would use the goods and clothes of the dead or even handle them, but rejected them outright. Scarcely 1 in 7 of the Genoese survived. In Venice, where an inquiry was held into the mortality, it was found that more than 70% of the people had died, and that within a short period, 20 out of 24 excellent physicians had also died. The rest of Italy, Sicily, and Apulia, and the neighboring regions maintained that they had been virtually emptied of inhabitants. The people of Florence, Pisa, and Lucca, finding themselves bereft of their fellow residents, emphasize their losses. The Roman Curia at Avignon, the provinces on both sides of the Rhone, Spain, France, and the Empire cry up their griefs and disasters, all of which makes it extraordinarily difficult for me to give an accurate picture. By contrast, what befell the Saracens can be established from trustworthy accounts. In the city of Babylon alone, the heart of the Sultan's power, 480,000 of his subjects are said to have been carried off by disease in less than 3 months in 1348. And this is known from the Sultan's register, which records the names of the dead, because he receives a gold bezant for each person buried. I am silent about Damascus and his other cities, where the number of dead was infinite. In the other countries of the East, which are so vast that it takes 3 years to ride across them, and which have a population of 10,000 for every 1 inhabitant of the West, it is credibly reported that countless people have died. Everyone has a responsibility to keep some record of the disease and the deaths, and because I am myself from Piacenza, I have been urged to write more about what happened there in 1348. Some Genoese, whom the disease had forced to flee, crossed the Alps in search of a safe place to live, and so came to Lombardy. Some had merchandise with them and sold it whilst they were staying in Bobbio, whereupon the purchaser, their host, and his whole household, together with several neighbors, were infected and died suddenly of the disease. One man there, wanting to make his will, died along with the notary, the priest who heard his confession, and the people summoned to witness the will, and they were all buried together on the following day. The scale of the disaster was such that virtually all of the inhabitants were subsequently struck down by sudden death, and only a tiny handful remained alive. Now, this is an interesting question, this. I mean, so there's wide variation in how long it took the disease to progress. 3 days is like a number that comes up a lot, but these sort of things sort of seem to suggest that, you know, people sort of just suddenly drop dead. I mean, whether this can be believed, I don't know. I mean, if everybody died, who's telling the story exactly, right? Or, you know, is it rumor? Did it become known? I don't know. Excuse me. Another of the Genoese, who was already suffering from the illness, managed to reach Piacenza. Finding himself unwell, he sought out his close friend Fulco della Croce, who gave him shelter. He immediately took to his bed and died, and then straight away Fulco, with his whole household and many of the neighbors, died too. And that briefly is how this disease, spreading rapidly throughout the world, arrived in Piacenza. I don't know where to begin. Cries and laments arise on all sides. Day after day, one sees the cross and the host being carried about the city, and countless dead being buried. The ensuing mortality was so great that people could scarcely snatch breath. The living made preparations for their burial, and because there was not enough room in individual graves, pits had to be dug in colonnades and piazzas where no one had ever been buried before. It often happened that man and wife, father and son, mother and daughter, and soon the whole household and many neighbors were buried together in one place. The same thing happened in Castel Arcato and Viguzolo, and in the other towns, cities, and settlements, and last of all in the Val Tidone, where they had hitherto escaped the plague. Very many people died. One Alberto de Sasso, who had come from the infected neighborhood around the church of the Franciscans, wished to make his will and accordingly summoned a notary and his neighbors as witnesses, all of whom, more than 60 of them, died soon after. Dude. At this time, the Dominican friar Cifredo de Bardis, a man of prudence and great learning who had visited the Holy Sepulchre, also died, along with 23 brothers of the same house. There also died within a short time the Franciscan friar Bertolino Coxadosha of Piacenza, renowned from his learning and many virtues, along with 24 brothers of the same house. So, man, this goes on for a long time. My God. Dude, it's a lot longer than I thought. Right. Okay. Anyway. So he's just talking about people that died, basically. Let's see. Any more? This is a just reward for our sins. I mean, this is medieval Christianity, right? We know that therefore whatever we suffer is the just reward of our sins. Now therefore, when the Lord is enraged, embrace acts of penance, so that you do not stray from the right path and perish. Let the proud be humbled. Let misers who withheld alms from the poor blush for shame. Let the envious become zealous in almsgiving. Let lechers put aside their filthy habits and distinguish themselves in honest living. Let the raging and wrathful restrain themselves from violence. Let gluttons temper their appetites by fasting. Let the slaves of sloth arise and dress themselves in good works. Let adolescents and youths abandon their present delight in following fashion. Let there be good faith and equity among judges, and respect for the law among merchants. Let pettifogging lawyers study and grow wise before they put pen to paper. Let members of religious orders abandon hypocrisy. Let the dignity of prelates be put to better use. Let all of you hurry to set your feet on the way to salvation. And let the overweening vanity of great ladies, which so easily turns to voluptuous, be bridled. I mean, this guy's basically like judging the entire world. Well, I mean, I don't know. Like maybe it's like I'm still alive, For the rest, so that the conditions, causes, and symptoms of this pestilential disease should be made plain to all, I have decided to set them out in writing. Excuse me. Those of both sexes who were in health and in no fear of death were struck by 4 savage blows to the flesh. First, out of the blue, a kind of chilly stiffness troubled their bodies. They felt a tingling sensation, as if they were being pricked by the points of arrows. a tingling sensation as though you are being pricked by the points of arrows. That seems a little different. I don't know. Chat, what do you reckon? Are you, when you get pricked by an arrowhead, is it usually a sort of tingling sensation? The next stage was a fearsome attack, which took the form of an extremely hard, solid boil. In some people, this developed under the armpit, and in others, the groin between the scrotum and the body. As it grew more solid, its burning heat caused the patients to fall into an acute and putrid fever with severe headaches. As it intensified, its extreme bitterness could have various effects. In some cases, it gave rise to an intolerable stench. In others, it brought vomiting of blood or swellings near the place from which the corrupt humor rose, on the back, across the chest, or near the thigh. Some people lay as if in a drunken stupor and could not be roused. Behold the swellings, the warning signs sent by the Lord. All these people were in danger of dying. Some died on the very day the illness took possession of them. Others the next day. Others, the majority, between the 3rd and 5th day. There was no known remedy for the vomiting of blood. Those who fell into a coma or suffered a swelling or the stink of corruption very rarely escaped. But from the fever, it was sometimes possible to make a recovery. So this does seem like a description of bubonic plague, given that there are 3 types. There's the normal type with the buboes. There is the pneumonic plague, where it attacks the lungs and you can get sort of human-to-human transmission via the breath. And the septicemic plague, where it gets into the blood and you're screwed, basically. I have, however, known a case where, although there was a stench arising from the patient, the use of the best theriac expelled the poison and prevented it from proving fatal. I don't know what a theriac is. That must be some kind of medicine of the time. If the tumor revealed itself in numbness, but not by any external growths, it was a sign of death, because then the poison passing into the veins of the heart smothered the patient. But if swellings appeared externally on the upper or lower body, the patient might be rescued. He could be cured by immediately letting blood from the appropriate part of the body, from his arm if the upper part of the body was affected, from the tendon of the foot if it was the lower part, when this was followed up with medicinal means using mallow or a plaster of marshmallow to ripen the boil and draw the humours from the seat of the illness, and then cutting out the boil, the patients received the blessings of health. But if the bitter fever persisted, it stole the life of its victims. It can be asserted on the clear evidence of experience that the illness was more dangerous during an eclipse, because then its effect was enhanced, and it was at such times that people died in the greatest numbers. Interesting. Yeah, they were very, very much into sort of astrology back then. Okay, so I want to read this other one. Mikey Bikey, theriac is a medical concoction originally labeled by the Greeks in the 1st century AD. Oh, thank you very much. Was that, that wasn't like the universal cure-all. That had like a different name that I can't quite remember. Mikey Bikey, anyway, what was in a theriac? Does anyone know? So must have been a sort of something like come from Galen, I reckon. So we move to unless you want to finish this off, I think this yeah, right, okay. So yeah, basically this is the end. Okay. The plague in Sicily. This account comes from the Cronaca of the Franciscan Michel da Piazza, edited by Rosarius Gregorio, Bibliotheca Scriptorum Quires in Sicilia, gestas sub Aragonam Imperio Retulere 1 Palermo 1791. I have checked some of the readings against the more recent editions. Okay, so, right. Michele da Piazza, 1790. So I presume this was actually written contemporaneously, but it has been preserved. In October 1347, at about the beginning of the month, 12 Genoese galleys, fleeing from the divine vengeance which our Lord had sent upon them for their sins, put into the port of Messina. The Genoese carried such a disease in their bodies that if anyone so much as spoke with one of them, he was infected with the deadly illness and could not avoid death. I mean, see, this seems like they're talking about human-to-human transmission via the breath. Now, I mean, if you spoke to a bunch of like people who had just gotten off a boat, the likelihood that they would have a lot of fleas is, it's true. I don't know. There has been some speculation that there was more than one disease circulating, and this could indeed be true. You sort of get this kind of negative feedback effect where, like, the more sort of disease happens, you get like big movements of civilian populations that spread disease, and lowered immune system, and all of this sort of started from like the movement of the Golden Horde across like sort of the steppe and all that kind of stuff, bringing stuff with them. So it's hard to say. I don't really know. The signs of death among the Genoese and among the Messinese when they came to share the illness with them were as follows. Breath spread the infection amongst those speaking together, with one infecting the other, and it seemed as if the victim was struck all at once by the affliction and was, so to speak, shattered by it. This shattering impact, together with the inhaled infection, caused the eruption of a sort of boil, the size of a lentil on the thigh or arm, which so infected and invaded the body that the victims violently coughed up blood, and after 3 days' incessant vomiting, for which there was no remedy, they died. And with them died not only anyone who had talked with them, but also anyone who had acquired or touched or laid hands on their belongings. The people of Messina, realizing that death racing through them was linked with the arrival of the Genoese galleys, expelled the Genoese from the city and harbor with all speed. but the illness remained in the city and subsequently caused enormous mortality. It bred such loathing that if a son fell ill of the disease, his father flatly refused to stay with him, or if he did dare to come near him, was infected in turn and was sure to die himself after 3 days. Not just one person in a house died, but the whole household, down to the cats and the livestock, followed their master to death. Because of the scale of the mortality, many Messinese looked to make confession of their sins and to make their wills, but priests, judges, and notaries refused to visit them, and if anyone did visit their houses, whether to hear confession or draw up a will, they were soon sure to die themselves. Indeed, the Franciscans and the Dominicans and others who were willing to visit the sick to hear their confession and impose penance died in such large numbers that their priories were all but deserted. What more is there to say? Corpses lay unattended in their own homes. No priests, sons, fathers, or kinsmen dared to enter. Instead, they paid porters large sums to carry the bodies to burial. The houses of the dead stood open, with all the jewels, money, and treasure in full view. And if someone wanted to enter, there was nothing to stop them. For the plague struck so suddenly that at first there weren't enough officials, and then there were none at all. The Messinese, observing this terrible and unnatural event, chose to leave the city rather than stay and die. Not only did they refuse to enter the city, they did not want to be anywhere near it, but camped with their families in the open air among the vineyards outside the city. Indeed, the majority went to the city of Catania, believing that the Blessed Virgin Agata of Catania would save them from the disease. From Catania, Queen Elisabetta of Sicily ordered her son Federico, who was then in Messina, to join her quickly, and he arrived promptly with Venetian galleys. Several of the Messinese in Catania addressed pious requests to the Patriarch, all begging that he would personally carry the relics of the Virgin Agatha to Messina with all due honor. For we believe, they said, that if the relics come to Messina, the city will be saved completely from this disease. The Patriarch, deeply moved by their prayers, agreed that he would come in person to Messina with the relics. This was about the end of November 1347. The Holy Virgin Agatha, aware of the deep-seated deceit and cunning of the Messinese, who have always wanted to keep the Virgin's relics at Messina and were capable of exploiting the calamity to that end, directed her prayers to God, who arranged it that the whole body of citizens took themselves off to the Patriarch, clamoring and shouting that they did not like this plan at all, and wresting the keys from the keeper of the church, they roundly abused the Patriarch, declaring that they would see him dead before they let the relics go to Messina. So even with the plague raging, you know, you've still got that, like, you know, sort of like classic thing going on, like, I think, you know, we're not gonna fucking let the relics go to Messina. Those guys are like totally dodgy. So Messina, Theriac, Mikey Bikey saying he looked it up on Wiki, and it seems it contained everything from treacle and opium to saffron, ginger, and castor. So it's just a sort of a weird kind of like spicy treacle, basically. Theriac, the most expensive of medicaments, was called Venice treacle by the English apothecaries. Theriac should have been aged at least a year. Children should not ingest it, but have it rubbed on them in a salve. Interesting. Confronted by this uproar, the Patriarch could not carry out his plan, and accordingly he entered the place where the relics were kept with all possible devotion and honor, and to the accompaniment of religious chants and prayers. He laved some of the holy relics with pure water and announced that he would take the holy water with him when he traveled to Messina. What a stupid idea on the part of you Messinese, to attempt under cover of devotion to steal the relics of the Blessed Virgin Agatha in such a furtive and underhanded manner. Goddamn shady Messinese trying to steal our relics. How could you forget that when the Virgin's body was at Constantinople and she wanted to come home, she appeared in dreams to Gisbert and Agoselm and ordered them to carry her body to Catania? Don't you think that if she had wanted to make her home in Messina, she would have said so? This is really, Oh, mate, this is so weird. Fucking 14th century beef, basically. Teabag and therapist, I'm getting War of the Bucket vibes. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. What more is there to say? The patriarch duly arrived at Messina with the holy water and cured all sorts of sick people in great numbers by sprinkling them with the water and making the sign of the cross. The citizens of Messina flocked to see him, hastening to him with great rejoicing and offering many thanks to him and to God. For demons were manifesting themselves in the city in the likeness of dogs, which inflicted great harm on the bodies of the Messinese. Numb with terror, no man dared leave their home. However, at the bidding of the Archbishop of Messina, with the general approval, they all agreed to process around the city with devout litanies. Just as all the people were entering the city, a black dog appeared in their midst, carrying a naked sword in its paw. I mean, okay. I mean, not in its mouth, in its paw. Never seen a dog carry a sword in its paw. Is this dog like on two legs? Is this kind of like some anthro furry kind of like thing? It rushed raging into the church and broke and smashed all the silver vessels, lamps, and candlesticks on the altars. At this sight, everyone, half dead with terror, prostrated themselves. When, after some hesitation, they got up again, they saw the dog leaving the church, but no one dared follow it or go near it. That's weird. Okay, what does that mean? Is that complete BS? Was someone like dressed up in like a dog mask or something? Like, I'm a dog. I'm like gonna like smash up the church. I mean, presumably the church was really smashed. I mean, that's just weird. Was it like the sort of medieval version of Antifa? They're like, we're gonna take this opportunity to like smash up the church, or was it I hate the Messinese? The Messinese, appalled by this incredible sight, were now all panic-stricken. They accordingly decided to go in procession barefoot and accompanied by priests to Santa Maria della Scala, 6 miles from Messina. As they drew near the Virgin, they all knelt as one, tearfully calling upon the help of God and the Virgin. They then entered the church with devout prayers, the priests chanting the psalm Miserere Nostri Deus, and laid hands upon a carving of the Mother of God, which had been placed there in ancient times, and which they had chosen to take back to Messina, because they thought that upon its arrival, the sight of it would drive out the demons from the city and deliver it from the mortality. Accordingly, they chose a suitable priest to ride carrying the statue in his arms with due respect, and so made their way back to the city with it. Okay, so they nicked this statue of the Virgin and brought it back to Messina. As the Holy Mother of God approached the city and saw it before her, all bloody with its sins, it was so hateful to her that she turned her back on it. She not only did not want to enter the city, but could not bear to look upon it. Therefore, check this, therefore the earth gaped wide, and the horse upon which the statue of the Mother of God was being carried became as fixed and immovable as a rock, and could not be made to go either forwards nor backwards. When the people of Messina saw these miracles, they begged the Virgin, making their lamentations with sad sighs and frequent tears, that she would not take revenge for their past sins. At their prayers, the Virgin, the Holy Bride of Christ, added her holy petitions to God to their humble prayers, whereupon the horse sets off again. The earth which had opened closes, and in a short time they had passed through the gate of the city, into which the Holy Mother of God had refused to enter. At last, accompanied by pious prayers to her, she made her entry into Santa Maria la Nova, the main church of Messina, where the women of Messina smothered the statue with silk cloths and precious jewels. I mean, that sounds like BS to me. I mean, right? Like, like the earth opened up. Oh wait, we got an entry. Oh, thank you very much, CDs. Simon JJ for $25. Oh God, thank you, Simon. Brilliant stream, Newsfist. Thank you, Simon. I really appreciate that, man. Thank you so much. I hope you're well, mate. George Rockwell, are we connecting the Black Death to the Jays poisoning wells? No, I'm probably going to do something about that next week. I've got some quite interesting original research to share on that. Turns out it's a little bit more complicated than it would seem at first sight, but cool story. So anyway, back to Messina. But could not the Holy Mother of God have remained in her church, she who totally refused to enter the city? Are we suggesting that she was carried unwillingly from her place? Indeed, she could have remained there, since there is no power that could remove her. She to whom all mercy, all might, all goodness is granted by God's power. But it was so that the people frantic with terror might cleanse themselves completely of worldly allurements. What more is there to say? The arrival of the statue profited nobody. On the contrary, the mortality raged even more, so that no one could help anyone else. Most of the citizens left Messina and scattered, some going to Calabria, others to various parts of Sicily, and especially to Catania. But what did this resort to flight avail them, given that the illness already carried within them was consuming their bodies? Of those who fled, some collapsed in the roadway, in fields, on the seashore, at sea, in the huts of Mascali, in woods, in ditches, and in all manner of unlikely places. Those who made it to Catania breathed their last in lodgings, and they died in the city in such numbers that the Patriarch, in response to a demand by the citizens of Catania, ordered that no one from Messina should be buried within the city on pain of excommunication, but should instead be buried outside the city in good, deep graves. See, that's some good advice right there. What, excuse me. What more is there to say? The Messinese were so loathed and feared that no man would speak with them or be in their company, but hastily fled at the sight of them, holding his breath. So the plague comes to Catania. They spread it to Messina. The Messenians come back to Catania, and all the Catanians are like, brother, get the fuck away from me. Oh my God. But hastily fled at the sight of them, holding his breath. And all the Catanians turned this into a sour joke, so that if anyone made to speak to someone, that person would reply in the vernacular, "Don't talk to me if you're from Messina." Not interested in talking to you right now. Or, are you from Messina, bruv? Don't want to hear that. No one would give them shelter, so that they could not find houses in which to live. And unless other Messinese already established in the city gave them shelter secretly, they were virtually without help. And thus the Messinese were dispersed across the whole island. I presume that island is Sicily. In going to Syracuse, their illness infected the Syracusians so thoroughly that it was the death of a great many people. The regions around Sciacca, and Trapani, and the city of Agrigento, also shared the pestilence with the Messinese in the same way, and especially Trapani, which has remained almost bereft of people. And what can we say about Catania, which has been delivered to oblivion? So strongly did the plague spring up there, that not only the pustules commonly called anthraci, but also a sort of tumor would erupt in various parts of the body, some on the chest, others on the legs, arms, or throat. These tumors were at first the size of hazelnuts and were accompanied by a marked stiffness and coldness. They so weakened and tormented the human body that at last the victim, unable to stay on his feet, had to take to his bed, by which stage he would be burning with a very high fever and suffering profound depression. I imagine you would be suffering from quite profound depression if you got the bubonic plague in those circumstances. These tumors grew to the size of a walnut and then to the size of a hen or goose egg, and their intense pain and the accompanying putrefaction of humors caused the victim to cough up blood, and this sputum, in passing from the infected lungs into the throat, corrupted the whole body. And it was from this corruption and from the imperfection of the humors that the victims died. The illness lasted 3 days. On the 4th day, at the latest, the victims went the way of all flesh. I mean, this is insane. I mean, I don't know what kind of incubation period they're talking about, but 3 days from onset to mortality is very, very fast. My understanding is that, like, you know, the bubonic plague that's about now, it's still about, people do still get it. You mainly get it from marmosets or something. Most of the cases you get are in America, and the reservoir is like some wild furry thing, like a marmoset or something. The Catanians were well aware that the illness quickly proved fatal, and when they felt the depression and the cold stiffness coming over them, their immediate priority was to make full confession of their sins to a priest, and then make their wills. But the mortality was so great in the city that judges and notaries refused to go and draw up wills, and if they did visit a sick man, they stood well away from him. Even priests were afraid to visit the sick for fear of death, and the mortality was so great that the judges and notaries were unable to meet the demand for wills, or the priests for hearing confession. Accordingly, the patriarch, concerned for the souls of the Catanians, bestowed upon every priest, however lowly, the same power to absolve sins, which he enjoyed as a bishop and a patriarch. As a result, it is believed on the best authority that all those who died passed without fail safely to God. That's nice. Duke Giovanni, afraid of death and not wanting to come near cities or other settlements because of the infected air, ranged ceaselessly through wild and uninhabited places. And as he roamed here and there like a fugitive, now at Aquamilli in the forest of Catania, now at a tower called Lublanco 6 miles from Catania, now at the church of San Salvatore de Blanchardo. San Salvatore de Blanchardo. In the forest of Catania, he came at last to a church or place called Santa Andrea, newly built by him within the woods of Mascali, where, while he was living safe and sound, illness came upon him and he died. His body was buried in the main church of Catania, in the tomb where the former king Federico, his father, was buried, and this was in April 1348. The mortality lasted from September, more or less, until the time of the duke's death. The mortality was so heavy that sex and age made no difference, but everyone died alike. The patriarch died in this mortality and was buried in the main church in Catania. May his soul rest in peace. Bro. Dude. So that's two accounts from the plague. This book is pretty long. I can do more if people are interested. I also tracked down a sort of urban legend about doctors spreading the plague, and I've got to say, at least the Facebook version that I found is full of crap. I looked up the original source, and it's BS. But there is a sort of version of it where some people got caught spreading the plague in Geneva in like 1580 or something like that. So it's not that there are not cases of people getting done for supposedly like trying to spread the plague, but it's a bit more sort of convoluted than, you know, it would appear. Yiz would love more episodes on the Black Death. Chat, would you like more episodes on the Black Death? Because there's a lot of stuff, and there's a lot of first-hand accounts to read. So please let me know in in the comments if you enjoy that kind of like thing. So yeah, so that's the hour. I guess next week then we can do Avignon. There's the and not only that, there's also the period afterwards, because plague was like around for a couple of centuries, and we can do 1666 when both the fire and the plague hit London, and there is some amazing art and stuff from then. I'm sure some of you have probably seen like the amazing art from like the London plague. Very, very memento mori. So yes, lots of stuff to cover. So thank you so much for coming, everyone. Thank you to super chatters, Mikey Bikey and Simon JJ. I really appreciate that. Thanks very much, bros. And I will see you again next week. Wait, let me get the window. Yeah. Good night, chaps.